Hello and welcome to AXSChat. I'm really genuinely excited, more so than usual, because today we've got Stephanie Cadieux on, who is the first Chief Accessibility Officer of a country that any of us know. So welcome, Stephanie, and congratulations to you and to Canada for taking this really impactful step and putting accessibility at the heart of the nation. So
thank you.
Really brilliant to have you with us, and thank you for making the time. I know you're up really early because you're on the Pacific coast, and we're recording this in afternoon UK time, which is very early morning for you. So thank you. No Antonio today; he's travelling, but Deborah and I are really keyed up to talk to you about your role. But first off, can you tell us a little bit about background and how you came into the role, and then I'd love to hear about what it means to be the Chief Accessibility Officer of a country.
Well, thank you first for having me on. I've been following you for quite some time, so it's an honor for me as well. Ooh, that was loud. So my background. Well, I've been around a while, not new to this space. I had a spinal cord injury when I was 18, which sort of thrust my life on a completely different path than I had intended. But after bouncing around a little bit, I ended up in working for a not-for-profit organization in an entrepreneurial role, which suited my background and skills. To build a peer support program for people with spinal cord injuries. And I did that, and while doing that, sort of really found my groove inside the not-for-profit sector, but starting to look more at the larger issues, advocacy, and our relationship with government and so on. That led to me being approached to run for public office. Which I did. And I served the last 13 years as a provincial member of the legislature and represented my community. And I spent 7 years at the cabinet table in a variety of roles as Minister of Social Development, which carried the disability file, Minister of Children and Families, which also carried a large portion of the disability file as it related to children, and a couple of other roles for shorter periods before that. Then this role came about. The federal government passed the Accessible Canada Act in 2019. Yay! And that was a long time coming. Obviously, being neighbors to the U.S., we were obviously aware of what was going on with the ADA for a very long time. But I think actually Canada thought, well, we don't need to do that because we're just doing it for all the right reasons. But myself included, rose-colored glasses off, and understanding over 30 years that we needed a lot more stick and a little less carrot. And so hence, I think the federal government moved with the Accessible Canada Act, and it was unanimously passed by Parliament. So that was a good sign in 2019. This role was one of the legislated roles inside the Act. And when they advertised they were looking for someone, I decided I needed to put my hand up, and here I am.
Excellent. You mentioned there are two roles, so there is also the commissioner
Correct
role as well. So the Accessible Canada Act, landmark piece of legislation, and you've got these two roles. So you've got the commissioner and the CEO. What are the two? What do the two different roles do? How do they play out, and which one has the
and actually, there's three actually roles. Because the Act put in place Accessibility Standards Canada, which is an organization which is in place to actually develop and set the standards that may or may not be put into law as regulation in all of the various areas. The Accessibility Commissioner was also appointed in May of this year when I was, and the Commissioner sits at the Human Rights Commission. And that role is to monitor compliance and enforcement of the Act as we roll forward. It'll be the complaints mechanism for the majority of the organizations that are captured under the Act. It's a bit complex when we get down there because there are a number of agencies that have that regulatory power for their certain area, but that's the complaints and enforcement mechanism. He's the bad guy. I like to say he's the bad guy. I'm the good cop inside government saying, let's do more. So really my role is to champion and challenge inside government. I would argue the work to the Act. And my role is actually as an independent special advisor to the minister responsible for the Act. So I will provide to the minister on an annual basis a report that will be tabled in Parliament about the progress we're making towards the goal of the Act, or the goals of the Act, which is a barrier-free Canada by 2040, which seems like a long way away, but it is not. And those of us who've worked in the field know it's going to take some time. But that's my legislated role, is to act as an advisor to the minister. I can provide other reports, I can do other things, but that's the one sort of mandatory annual reporting structure for me. And in that, I'm going to look not only at what we're doing and where we're making those gains, but also what are the emerging trends, issues, things we need to be aware of as we move forward, as things change in the world around us. Are there places in the world that are ahead of us on something where we should be taking information and learning and developing based on what is going on in other places? So there's a lot of room for me to work, but I really do see the role as I do that monitoring work. It's really to also challenge and inspire inside government to keep this agenda front and center, and to make sure that we are striving and not settling.
Ooh, I love that last statement. Let's strive and not settle. Stephanie, we talked about it before I got on, but I'm joining from the States, and we in the States have made it's a little messy here. And, our litigation is way up and we're going after each other. And I was actually speaking for Helen Keller yesterday, and one of the groups that, Helen Keller, and somebody said, well, but does it cause problems? And I said, absolutely. It would have happened because of the way we're doing things in the States. It's all about compliance. It's all about litigation. It's really created an us and them, and we're fighting each other. And it's very obvious that that's happening in the States, and sad. Mm-hmm. I'm also a little bit sad because I love my country so much that because I looked it up, there are 185 countries, including Canada and the UK, that have ratified the CRPD. But unfortunately, my beautiful country has not. And we're one of the few countries that haven't. That makes me sad as a citizen, because once you leave our borders, you are not protected by our Americans with Disabilities Act. It also makes me sad that my government has not made a priority of creating a leader like you, Stephanie, for our country, because we've done a lot to try to figure accessibility, human-centered design, all that out. But the thing that really is still really freaking me out a bit is that we know how to make things accessible. I don't care how big your company is, how big your government it is. We actually know how to do it.
Yeah.
But it's sort of a pain in the butt doing it some, and it's easy to forget and blah, blah, blah. So I like that Canada actually really is responding to what the citizens need. It doesn't, I'm sure you're super political, and I don't even understand how political you are, but it just seems from looking from the United States into Canada, I just am so grateful that they appointed you and that we have a chief accessibility officer of a major country. And I really wonder what the other countries are doing, because Canada set the bar. Really? States? What the heck are you doing over there? So I want to say that, but I also want to say that it is our responsibility. Anyone that's watching this, it's our responsibility to get behind Stephanie and make her the best CAO that was ever created in the world, because they did it first. But she can't do it alone. I think of this, I can't help it, but I think of Obama didn't say, yes, I can. He said, yes, we can.
We can.
We can. So I just want to say that, because I'm actually proud and envious of what you're doing in Canada. I would be curious, because of my stupid US brain, how will the enforcement act work? Because I know in the States we're doing it a little wildly. We are suing people, and because we're suing people, and we've sued a lot of brands, corporate brands, but because we're doing that, they are trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. But also, I think the problem we're causing is we're causing it only to be about a compliance conversation. And one more comment, Stephanie, then I'll be quiet. I remember speaking to somebody that's way up in the military of our metaverse, and I was talking about this, and he was saying, "Oh, you mean 508?" I said, "No, I don't. I'm not talking about compliance. I'm not talking about Section 508. I'm talking about we know how to design technology so that humans can use it. Could we please do that? We know how to do it now, Stephanie. So you have a very important role, but it must be really a little intimidating to be the first." Thank you.
It is. Let's be honest. There's a great deal of pressure that I'm putting on myself to make sure that I do this the right way, that I set the office up for success, no matter who follows, and I hope I last long enough to accomplish that. But I think we are. You mentioned compliance and litigation and how we're doing. It is, I think, always a challenge. And and I look at Canada has a robust human rights framework, so disability has always been protected. But it doesn't mean that has translated to inclusion or acceptance on the ground. And, we talk about, accommodations and these sorts of things, and we say, well, I'm doing it because I have to. I have to do this. Not, hey, what can we do to make sure that this works for everybody? Those two things sound very different. And that approach is what I think ultimately is different. And as I said earlier, we thought, oh, we're doing it well. We can do it just with motivation. And now we're realizing, well, we need a little more than motivation to get this done. But there is a balance to find, because I really don't believe, I believe societally, certainly culturally in Canada, we have accepted the fact that people with disabilities are full citizens, should be included, should be everywhere, have all the same rights. You talk to anybody and say, oh, well, of course, that should be accessible, But it still hasn't translated into action or into a reality for people with disabilities. And so really what I see as our biggest challenge is culture. We still have to get at that unconscious bias that allows people to not do it right? And it is not intentional. I really don't believe it is an intentional thing people set out to do. It is just that deep held belief in there somewhere from an experience in their life at some point that says disability is less. Disability is not as important. We don't have to worry about that, and it's not me. And what we need to get to is it's everybody. We need to just build things right in the first place. And what I ultimately want to leave is, if it's not accessible, it's just wrong.
Right. It's amazing. Why would you build anything to leave people out? Why? We know how to do this. Okay, Neil, you go. I'm going to not rant.
Okay, so I think that you've already said you're the good cop, so you're the one that is helping lead the culture change with the honey or the carrots. And we were on a panel together only about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about some of this. And I think that culture change is part of also systemic change, and so
It is.
there is a need through not just legislation, but your standards and the norms and how organizations and countries and political bodies and local society do these things that needs to change over time. And some of that's mindset and culture, but some of it's also process and leading this through creating a framework that enables organizations to make that change. Because I think that a lot of people look at this and go, yes, I know we should, but it's too hard. That sort of, where do I start? And I haven't got much time. And so we have to make that time and give people, and be realistic and pragmatic. And as members of the community, sometimes that's hard, right? Because we have our needs and we have our requirements to be included. And what we're saying here is actually we're going to have to sort of wait for jam tomorrow, because we can't all have jam today if we want everybody to be included. So by saying that you'll have an accessible Canada by 2040, you're creating the space to do some of that. So which I think is important, because I think surely you're going to be under pressure. Why can't you do it by 2030? That's 8 years. Isn't that enough for you?
Why can't we do it by 2023? I'm as impatient as anyone.
Yes, we should have done, but let's be real. So what are the sort of strategic things that you think that will help industry and government and the Canadian public service start to embed this more? Because it's not just standards; it's all of those other things. So what do you think can be the levers that drive this?
Well, I think, the way the legislation was drafted, the only regulation at this point, the only thing that they actually have to do right now is create a plan. It's go out, it's talk to people with disabilities in their organizations, in their public, develop a plan under these 7 areas that the legislation touches on: employment, communication technology, transportation, built environment, procurement, policy and procedure, a policy and program. They have to look at all those areas and say, how are we doing? What do we need to do better? And how do we get there? So that is the way we start to build a plan to 2040, right? And allow them some space to look at themselves and say, oh, well, I hadn't thought of that. Well, that doesn't make us bad. We just haven't done it. And now we can, because now we've been told. Now we understand. And now we have a plan to get there. Because you're right, we're all impatient. Members of the community are all impatient for very good reason. But we also have to recognize that this is a lot of change. This is a lot of moving parts. And there's things that are at some times kind of competitive and counterintuitive. So we need to do this collectively. We need to do it together. And the Act starts with the federal government agencies and the federally regulated sectors. So there's going to be a momentum that builds slowly as they do that work, and as that work impacts out. So our provinces also need to have legislation. Most do now, but they need to come in with something complementary for all of the jurisdiction that they have, because they do in our country have jurisdiction over things like on a day-to-day basis, education, healthcare, transportation in province transportation and things like that. So there's a lot of places where, for a person with a disability, the federal government, we could have the most accessible federal government ever, It wouldn't affect most people. I mean, most people don't wake up in the morning and go, hey, how do I interact with my federal government today? Right? So what we need is for all of those other agencies, all of those other industry or regulatory bodies, et cetera, to come in place underneath and mimic or mirror what the federal government is doing in their own areas. And that's the municipalities, that's the provinces, and that's the private sector. And so, I want to be able to go to a restaurant and not worry about the fact that they only have high top tables. I want to be able to go to the store and be able to get in even when there's snow piled up. Right. So there's a lot of trickle down, and to really truly get to a barrier-free Canada, we have to have everybody pulling together. It's an all hands on deck effort, but that also means it's a lot of education. It's a lot of process and a lot of culture change, and it will come. But we now have an act and I like it or not, we now have a me that's going to wave that flag, shine that light, and keep us pushing in that direction.
Stephanie, I have we could talk I know for days and days, but I want to bring up some complications that we've seen in the States. So I'm very proud of everything we've done. I think we've tried really hard. We've had progress, and yay for us. But wow, we also messed things up so bad along the way. And that, by the way, is, I think, what we call progress, right? Because that's just what happens. But it was interesting that here in the States, and that when we were doing it, the ADA, the Section 508, of the different laws, that we ask our government to do it first. You eat the dog food first, see how that goes, and we'll learn from you. And we did some very interesting, our trusted testers. Mm-hmm. It was fascinating to me as a citizen, and I was a consultant too, but as a citizen, to see which of our agencies stepped up. Mm-hmm. Because some of our agencies that stepped up, it sort of surprised me, because actually they had a get out of jail card. So get out of jail free card, as they say, with Monopoly. Right. But like our Department of Defense, which has 23 agencies underneath it, they are the ones that created the trusted testers. So, and they actually could have gotten out of it. But anyway, so I thought that was interesting as a citizen to watch. But I think also what has gotten very, very confusing is, for me, and I know I know you can't fix all this, Stephanie, but we see the accessibility community, the accessibility industry doing things, investors coming in, investing in products that actually leave large sections of our community out, like, for example, some accessibility overlays. And so, one thing that I'm so confused about is, how in the world do you try to get your hands around the market not playing appropriately when because I keep saying to corps like Neil, it's a bad example because Neil is such an expert in this, but buyer beware, know what you're doing, look what the community's saying, but we don't see that happening very well. And so I say that to you empathetically, because you are actually trying to solve some gigantic social issues that society hadn't figured out. So good luck with that, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you. And you're right. There are challenges like that. And I mean, ultimately what the goal is that through this work, and as the government does this, and with government's purchasing power and influence, we can start to demand that, right? So we can start to have, within the procurement policies, an assurance that what we're buying and what government is buying works. But we will make mistakes. There will be things that we have to learn to fail forward with, right? We will go, oh, okay, that didn't work out. We need to go a different direction, or we need to double back and fix that. Let's hope there's not too many of those. Let's hope we start to ask the right questions early. But it's going to happen, and we know that.
So we learn from our mistakes, Stephanie.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we learn.
Exactly. That's human.
Got to give people a chance to make mistakes too.
Yeah, and we want people to not be afraid to start, as Neil said, before. Oh, it's too overwhelming. I can't do everything. So I don't know where even to go. We want people to start, right? Yeah. And for me, part of my job, I think, in the first year is really trying to find and set that baseline from which we're working. Where are we today? And because if we're going to measure progress, we really need to know where we are. So that'll be one of the things I need to do. But the other thing will be to really highlight for agencies what other agencies are doing, where are their best practices, where are their little things. For example, we have beautiful natural environment in Canada, right? And we want people to be able to enjoy it, all people. But what does that mean for our National Park Service? What does that mean? How do you make parks and mountains and oceans accessible to people? That is complex, difficult, expensive. But there are things we can do to improve what we have today. And there's an example of somebody on the front lines in one of our smallest provinces, I think, who took it upon themselves to get a beach mat for one of the local beaches. And immediately it opens up use of that park and that beach to all sorts of groups who are doing adapted recreation, to families, to people who had never been there before. It was a small thing, and it's not everything, but it was a good step forward. And we need to let people know that taking those steps is positive and it's a move in the right direction. So even if you can't do everything today, get started.
Absolutely. And those steps, you keep moving forward. You find when you look back that you've been on a journey and you've progressed. A lot of the accessibility industry and a lot of organizations are now deploying maturity models. Essentially what you're doing at this point is going through your countrywide maturity assessment of government and the federal government at that. I think that one of the things that we do when we do maturity work with people is the first thing we say is don't beat yourselves up about where you are now. It's meant to be objective, and the point is you're doing this exercise because you have the goodwill that you want to improve, and so don't mark yourself realistically. Be honest about the gaps that you have, but don't feel bad about them because the fact that you're taking part in this exercise means that you wish to address them. But it also means that you can then, through these exercises, align with, in the case of us, organizations' strategies. In the case of Canada, it's the governmental strategies and the long-term aims of the federal government for society, so that you're not going against the flow of everything else. Because I think that when we think about the amount of energy we expend on some of these efforts, we have a limited amount of energy to do this stuff and a limited amount of resource. If we align that with some of the other activities that are taking place, then we're likely to get a lot more bang for our Canadian buck.
Well, and there's lots of examples, right, of where we've done hard things before, where we have embedded a lens on sustainability, for example, on greening our infrastructure and these sort of things. We've done hard things before, and this is no different. It takes that same effort, and I think we do have to acknowledge that nobody's got it perfect. Nobody's perfect, and in many ways we won't ever be perfect because there will always be new things, changing things, and we will need to adapt. we have to be flexible. We have to be adaptable. And gosh knows, people with disabilities are flexible and adaptable and innovate every day. So we can add value in doing that work. But nobody's perfect. There are corporations out there that are doing a really good job of some of this. And there are governments that are doing a really good job of some of this. But I haven't found anywhere in the world that's got it all right. And Canada has set a goalpost, and by passing legislation and putting in place, myself and these other entities has said, we're going to do this. We are committed to it. That's a big step for a country to make. And I'm really glad that our country did that cross politics, right? This is not a political issue. The implementation is challenging. There may be political decisions that have to be made at some point. That will not be my role anymore. But the reality is that we've agreed we need to do it. Now how? Now it's the how. Now it's the nitty-gritty.
That's great. I think that you're right. That statement of intent is in itself very powerful. And I think you mentioned green. Well, sustainability is a huge issue, but actually disability inclusion is part of sustainability. We talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, it's in there. And one of the things I'm passionate about is making people understand the sort of economic concept of externalities. We understand them in terms of pollution, smog and carbon emissions, but they come in design too, and they come in societal impacts. So when we design inclusively, when we plan, and when I talk about design, it could be designing policy, it could be designing how government works. Then we can create those positive externalities of a more inclusive society that are so important. So I think it's fantastic that the long-term vision of the Canadian government and the fact that it is across politics and apolitical, I think it's a marker for the rest of the world to follow, and I hope they do. And I know Deborah wants to get in one more comment, but whilst I remember, I want to thank My Clear Text for keeping us captioned and our friends for supporting us through our GoFundMe. So, and I'll hand it over to Deborah to close. Thank you very much, Deborah.
Yes, thank you, Neil. And the question I have for you, Stephanie, is, and we talked about this before we got on air, but first of all, thank you, Canada, for putting you in as their Chief Accessibility Officer. That is such a major leadership thing. I'm so proud of Canada. But I believe our entire community, all of our industries, everyone has to get behind you. So you have to be successful. You have to be. And we all need you to be successful, and you're going to make mistakes. But I would say the one question I would like to ask you is, what can our entire global community and industries do to get behind you, Stephanie? What can we do to help you? I know you're being seen right now, and you're on this show, and there's others, but honestly, I really think it's all of our jobs to help you. And so maybe, you can think about it and tell us now, but also maybe you could come back in like 8 or 9 months and tell us, okay, what do you need now? Because we got to get behind you to make you successful. And obviously you're the right person, but I just am saying to the audience, if we don't get behind her and she fails, this is our failure. We cannot allow this to happen. So, sorry. Okay.
Well, with that pressure,
I'm bad about that.
Thanks so much. You know what? The reality is it is going to take, like I said, an all hands on deck, and for the community and the advocacy community, the in the trenches everyday accessibility community who's doing this work. I need your expertise. I need you to tell me things. I need you to show me things, and help me amplify the need. Help me amplify the business case. Why are we doing this? Why does it matter? Not just because it's the law, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because there's a real business case to do it. And that's not to take away from the fact that it's the right thing to do, because ultimately that's duh. But actually our official need more coffee. Our official social media accounts launched yesterday. for my office. So please help me spread the word, and certainly, we'll spread yours as well. But it's coming together.
Do you know? It's not that I said that.
You know what? They're too.
I'll ask Jennifer.
They're too complex for me to fight. Unfortunately, nothing.
That's okay. We'll find them out, and we'll make sure the audience knows.
Yeah, and but I appreciate that, and like I say, I need everyone's expertise. I am not an expert in all of this. I am a champion for it.
Right.
I will lean on others to bring that expertise to the table.
Right. And Stephanie, you also need, I'm going to finish answering the question for you. You need the corporations, the multinational corporations to get behind you, to share what they've done. For example, just bragging about Neil and Atos, what they've done with apprenticeships for accessibility, professionals. Oh my gosh. And somebody was talking about in the States, and I said, did you see what they did over there in the UK? Oh no, please. Yeah. And there are maturity models that so one thing I think we all could do is, like, if you have something that's really good, send it to Stephanie, send it to Canada, so that they can look and see, oh, maybe this, I just think it takes all of us. So I'm going to officially stop talking, Neil. You'll be glad.
Thank you, Deborah. And thank you, Neil.
Thank you. It's been great having you on the show. Yes, looking forward to welcoming you back already, and really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have on Twitter. So thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.